All right, let's welcome into Straight Fire. You know him. He comes on every August to talk college football, gambling, and I fondly remember last year he came on like a week before the season. I was like, okay, so week one coming up. Anything you fired on? He's like, yeah, I got 81 bets in the hopper, and I was like, what the hell? That's incredible. Brad Powers, the legend. Brad, how are you, man?
Hey, thanks for having me, man. We've been doing this a couple years. Time flies, but looking forward to week zero, week one.
Yeah, yeah, and you got the subscription service, right? Still, and are you still in Vegas? How is life in Vegas, by the way? Just curious.
Uh, no surprise, it's hot. Hottest year ever. So I mean, it was.
Oh,
I don't like wishing summer away, but this year I am. But yeah, still here in Vegas. Still got service and stuff. Still betting. Trying to have. I like having multiple revenue systems coming
oh
in.
yeah,
You
revenue
know what I
streams.
mean?
Got to keep them flowing. So, are
Yep.
you still occasionally like driving to the border so you can fire in Arizona or what's the other state that borders that has gam? Not Utah, obviously. Is there another one?
No, that's it. You got to
Oh,
drive to
okay.
Arizona,
And
California, Utah. You got it.
how often are you doing that? Once a week? Once a month?
Not as often. I got guys that I trust
Oh,
that
that's
I'm,
right.
more state. There's what 38 states now, so I happen to have Ohio is where I'm from, so I have a lot of friends and family that are getting down at those books that we
Mm.
don't have. That's what people don't understand, Jason. I mean, yeah, we're supposed to be the sports betting capital of the world. We don't have FanDuel. We don't have DraftKings. We don't have a lot of the newbie books out there.
Do you think they'll crash the party eventually, or what? Like,
I don't think so. It's
really
pretty. Yeah, I don't think they'll. Even though DraftKings headquarters is in Vegas, I there's just stuff that there's just an old school way of thinking here. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I'll just put it that
interesting?
way.
All right, you said you're from Ohio. The first bet I made was on Ohio State to win the national championship this year. Georgia's the current favorite. Ohio State's looking good. They just named the transfer from K State, the starting quarterback. I saw they're only an underdog at Oregon. I don't know. It feels like this is probably the year for the Buckeyes. Maybe there's some extra motivation seeing Michigan win the Natty last year. Your thoughts on the Ohio State heading into the season?
Yeah, I mean, if you bet it really early, you probably got a good number. I think it's a little priced out now, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, look, Georgia and Ohio State are the two best teams in the country, in my opinion. Oregon would be that third. I know Ohio State plays at Oregon, but even if they lost that game, I would say advantage Ohio State if they got Oregon in a rematch in the Big Ten championship game. Keep
Oh
in mind,
yeah.
there's no divisions in the Big Ten. You know, on one hand, yeah, I like Ohio State. I got them number two in my power ratings. On the other, I still got questions because I mean, I respect guys like Urban Meyer, who's forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But
Mhm.
I mean, Ohio State's being talked about and in some instances being priced like this, great team, one of the best, most talented teams in recent college football history. And I don't see that. I'm not a huge Will Howard guy. I'm not even sure he was going to start at Kansas State this year. They like the Avery Johnson that much. And man, rewatching tape at the line of scrimmage and their three biggest games last year. Missouri, Michigan, and Notre Dame. I know they won the Notre Dame game, but I thought they were controlled at the line of scrimmage. And I know all these guys are back and they get talked up, but I mean, did they really get that much better from their
Hmm.
junior to senior season? I'm not sure.
Interesting. Who was hired first? Did they land him in the portal first, or did they add Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator first? Because I'm just
Yeah,
curious if Kelly loves this move or maybe push for it.
it was Will Howard first and then Chip
Okay.
Kelly.
Huh. Well, I don't. I mean, Kelly wanted out of UCLA so bad. I don't
Oh,
think he
yeah.
would have. He would have held out if it was someone other than if he didn't like Howard. I'm just curious how you think that'll mesh. I didn't watch enough K State last year to know if Howard can do what Chip Kelly will want him to. I'm assuming you think it's going to be a pretty healthy marriage.
Oh yeah, I think it'll be fine. I mean, he's a little bit mobile. He's not a great thrower. I don't think he's an improvement over McCord in the passing game, but he's more mobile than McCord, and he'll be just fine in that regard. Chip Kelly, is still. I think he's lost his fastball, but would I put
Ooh.
Chip Kelly among still one of the top offensive minds in college football? Absolutely. So it'll be fine. Well, it also helps Will Howard. He's got still a very dynamic wide receiver core, and oh yeah, by the way, probably the best 1-2 punch at running back in the country, and Judkins and Travion Henderson.
Yeah. But you still have them too. I'm assuming Georgia's number one. It's weird. I all this hype about Carson Beck. I mentioned him on the herd a couple times, and I had somebody in the NFL text me, Jay, slow down on Carson Beck. I was like, why? He started 14 games. If he were like the next coming of, I don't know, Trevor Lawrence or whatever, we would have already known. Where are you on Carson Beck, who is a bit, I don't want to say they were hiding him in the SEC title game, but they certainly weren't using him and didn't trust him against Alabama. Something happened in that game that was like, ooh, Weird.
That's a good observation. I do question Georgia's entire offensive game plan in that game against Alabama. I think experience will matter in his case because he didn't have that much experience. Now a year under his belt, they are expecting him. They're putting more on his plate. They certainly weren't afraid to trot him out in the spring game. He attempted the Heisman favorite attempted 48 passes in a spring game, so they wanted to get him some work there. Look, I like him better than Will Howard. I can tell you that much. So
Okay.
if it comes down to a national championship game, what quarterback and what coach I like Georgia. And that's mainly why Georgia is ahead of Ohio State in the power rating. Plus, I like Georgia a little bit better at the line of scrimmage. So
Mm.
certainly they lose their top two running backs. I don't know how close you pay attention, Jason, but there's words that their starting running back might be out week one.
Oh.
They had one of their top wide receivers got in trouble with the loss, so there is going to be a lot more on Carson Beck. He's going to have to be playmaker instead of distributor this year.
So we got the top two out of the way. Brad, some smart people have told me for years, you really schedule a national championship. Based on your schedule, you can tell if someone's going to be in the mix or not. But I wonder how much that calculus changes now that there's a playoff. So Ohio State, Oregon is possibly game of the year. Let's just say Oregon wins. Fine. But Ohio State's not eliminated. They're still going to make the playoff for sure. They just won't probably host a game, right? Is that a fair way to assess it?
Yeah, it's a much different market and a much different thought process. It's why, you see win totals at 10.5 for Georgia and Ohio State. Sometimes the top level teams, you see an 11 pop up because of they have that much superiority over the rest of the teams. And plus, both of those teams have tough road games this year. I just wonder, are you going to be, I'm not saying they're going to throw a game or two, but I just think there's going to be cases where there's a little bit of load management because you can get by with a loss or two and still make the playoffs if you're a Georgia or Ohio State. The reality is you want your roster the healthiest it can be at the end of the season to make that run. Ohio State could lose to Oregon, but again, keep in mind, you got 4 auto bids from the conference champs. So that conference championship game is basically, whether it's the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, that's the start of the playoffs right there because the winner of those games get, the 4 seed and get that bye.
The counter to that would be, well, hey, you know what? They're going to be exhausted. Whoever plays in the conference championship game. Meanwhile, if you don't make the conference championship, let's say let's say you're Ohio State and you somehow don't make the conference championship, right?
Yep.
Your last game is Michigan. And then you get like a lengthy respite, which may be more valuable, right? Than a home game. I don't know. How much, where do you have home field advantage in college football right now?
Yeah, it's closer to 2, about 2.4 to be exact. So it's certainly not worth 3. In fact, 20 years ago, college football was probably 3.5, 4. It's just travel doesn't mean that much anymore. Kids are just able to handle, noise. Just kudos for the coaching staffs for having these kids ready. They're just used to playing in big time environments. So not as big of a deal, but I think you bring up a good point. And I think a sneaky, in the weeds here, but the seeding that I would like is the 5th seed in college football because you get that home game in round 1. You're gonna play most years the top group of 5 team. You're gonna be a 2 touchdown plus favorite in that game, and then you're gonna get in the next round. You're gonna get the weakest conference champ. A lot of times, it's gonna be the Big 12 champ. 2-3 loss team. You'll probably be favored over them, and that's at a neutral site. So that's a sneaky way. When the playoff comes and you see that 5 seed, I think that's a team that I'd be looking to bet in the futures market.
Interesting. Now, there's nothing analogous to the NCAA tournament, really, is there? Here with like seeding, like if you're in the 8-9 game, you're obviously screwed because you have to face the one next.
Yeah.
But the 5th seed, that's interesting. So when you're mocking out how things shake out, if we're to assume Georgia and Oregon are 2 of the 4, who do you have as your other 2 big conference winners?
Well, I still have Ohio State as 2. So I would have Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Florida State in the ACC would be the 3rd seed, 4th seed for me. Not that I have Florida State as the 3rd best team. It's just I think they'll win the ACC. 4th would be Utah out of the Big 12. 5 seed, just because I like Oregon that much. And I think it is kind of 50-50 between them and the Buckeyes. It would be Oregon as that 5 seed. So that would be advantageous. They'd play like a Boise State or a Memphis or a Liberty. And then turn around and play Utah, which they'd be a significant favorite over. So I think Oregon would have a clear path to the semifinals. And then at that point, you're going to be playing legit teams once you reach the Final Four.
Huh. That's an interesting shakeout. Now, we barely talked Alabama here 10 minutes in. Nick Saban is gone. I'm just curious. It's weird. Belichick leaves the Patriots, and it looks like they're going to be total trash this year. Mayo looks like he's a little out of his depth. Not quite the case in Alabama losing Saban, right?
Yeah, you're right. Well, I mean, difference is you hired one of the best coaches in the country, Kalen
Yeah.
DeBoer, who wins everywhere and wins immediately. He inherited a losing program in Washington, went 25-3, and led him to a national championship game in 2 years. It's a guy that, I mean, some Alabama fans wanted, Sarkeesian from
Hmm.
Texas or Dan Lanning from Oregon because they served under Saban's staff. Reality is this: Kalen DeBoer played those two guys 5 times in 2 years at Washington, was an underdog in all 5 games, went 5-0. Not against the spread, 5-0 straight up. Won all 5 games outright against Lanning and Sark. So I think he's an elite coach. You want a hot take? Who would you rather have for the next 5 years? I'm not talking about the career. Obviously, Nick Saban's the GOAT, but for the next 5 years in college football, would I rather have Nick Saban or Kalen DeBoer? I'd rather have Kalen DeBoer. So
Yeah.
uh, I
One's
think Alabama's
ascending.
in good hands. There's certainly some
Sure.
question marks on this year's team. It's not, an elite Alabama team, but they're going to be right there in the mix. There's a reason why
Yeah.
Georgia's still only about a 2.5 point road favorite in that one.
Where are you on Milrow, the quarterback? Because I know he early last year was like, oof, and he ended up getting benched. I think he got benched twice, and it was like
Yep.
this guy, he's just not that good. But by the end of the year, he looked like a player. Now I'm hearing like, yeah, this guy's got an NFL future. Have you come around on him at all?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be Michael Penix throwing the football like what DeBoer had last year at Washington. But you look at Michael Penix with DeBoer when he was, keep in mind, Penix was at Indiana when DeBoer was the offense coordinator. Then without him, and then with him, I mean, it was pretty, contrast. So he's going to get better. I'm talking Milrow is going to get better coaching than what he got
Mm,
last year from Tommy Rees. So
interesting.
I'm pretty high. I didn't bet him to win the Heisman, but I think he'll be a better passer in year two.
Not to go too aside, but you said the Heisman. I remember last year too. You had like a bunch of guys to win the Heisman.
Yeah, you
I'm
had DJU if I remember.
DJU was one of my bets. You remember that? You laughed at the time, and you're still laughing. I don't. Where is he
Or
now? I
maybe
don't
it's
even
two
know.
years ago. Maybe it's 2 years
Maybe it
ago.
was 2 years. Where is he now? By the way.
He's at Florida State. So you'll see him on Saturday.
Oh, he's starting for Florida State. I've done
Yeah,
no
he's
no
starting at
homework on
Florida
this one of
State.
those. Dude, I had to block so many of these FSU clowns from last year when I said they weren't going to make the playoffs. I mean, it was like a barrage just every day. So I just
Yeah.
blocked all. So I have no. I'm not up to speed on FSU. So he's the starter there. Interesting. You
Yeah.
think can he do anything there? I know
I
you're
mean,
not a
he
fan.
ain't going to win the Heisman, but I think he
I
can be functional enough to get Florida State to the playoffs. I'll put it that way.
all right. Well, give me a few of your Heisman wagers so far that you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I bet some of the favorites. Some would be boring. I like Carson Beck. That was the biggest one that I bet. My favorite one, though, as far as value, would be Dylan Gabriel, Oregon. I just
Okay.
he's going to put up numbers. If Bo Nix can put up numbers like that in Oregon's offense, Dylan Gabriel's capable. And I just think there's going to be a story. You're betting storylines and stuff and like that. And Oregon gets a big win over Ohio State. I mean, that would be the game that puts him to the top of the Heisman chart if he has a good game. And plus, I mean, when his career is over, he is going to have if he stays healthy this year, he'll have every single statistical record in the history of college football for career yards, touchdowns, you name it, almost unbeatable records because he gets that extra year because of COVID. I think that'll be a good storyline and a feather in his cap. A couple off the radar. I like Jackson Dart, Ole Miss. Again, I'm betting
Really?
quarterbacks on teams that are, off quarterback friendly and
Hmm.
teams that can win 10 more games. So I like him. And uh, Riley Leonard from Notre Dame, I think is interesting because his new offensive coordinator was the coordinator OC at LSU last year, Mike Denbrock. Riley Leonard can, run around. Obviously, when you can run for 500 plus yards in a Heisman quarterback market, I like having that dual threat. And boy, got a big time game right away. Say Notre Dame beats A&M, he has a big game week one. He's going to be among the top 3-4 favorites right away. And boy, if you got 20-1, 25-1, 30-1 on him, I wouldn't mind being in that spot.
Interesting. So it's funny you bring up Riley Leonard. I was talking to somebody from Notre Dame, and it sounds like he was injured last year at Duke, and they were like, "Oh, you're fine, play through it." And he was not healthy, and he did
Yep.
not perform well. So then he goes to Notre Dame. The first thing they do, like, "Yeah, you need surgery." And it was like, how could Duke be? I guess Duke was desperate to win games. Riley Leonard was their best chance. So now he goes to Notre Dame. I, you think he's going to be good, that good out of the gate coming off surgery?
Yeah, two surgeries. He had a surgery right away after the season. Then he had another cleanup in March, but uh, he's running around a lot. I guess he's been full go since the start of summer. So not start of camp August. I'm talking in June. And I mean, I follow Notre Dame quite a bit. So he's been running around. He looks totally healthy.
Yeah. By the way, you do the amazing thing where you're watching like spring games and practices
Yeah.
on. Is it on YouTube or where are you watching those games? Are they
Well, I
streaming?
mean, Fox actually, Fox National televised the Buckeyes in
Well,
Michigan this year.
that's
So
the
it's
Buckeyes.
becoming a big thing.
I'm talking the lesser games. I mean, aren't you
Yeah.
doing like Florida Atlantic practices and stuff like that?
No, well, yeah, I try if they're available. I'll tell you a couple that I got this year. Somebody was on the sidelines at UTEP, filmed the whole spring game, so I watched that. And then somebody pieced together Boise State spring game from the stands. So I try to get that. But the beauty is these conference networks. I mean, I'm not watching a lot of Group of Five spring games, but SEC network, ACC network,
Yeah.
Big Ten network. I mean, they all televise every single spring game.
That's pretty cool. I got to give you a shout out for that. You know who we haven't mentioned is Quinn Ewers. I know a lot of people first impression, well, cocky guy with a mullet and mouthy, and it seems like he's cleaned all that stuff up. He has the third best odds to win the Heisman. Where are you on Ewers?
Yeah, there's a reason why I haven't really brought him up. I would say among the contenders this year, Texas certainly is a contender. I think they're my biggest fade. I bet
Really?
under the win total. I haven't
Wow.
bet Ewers to win the Heisman. I had bet against Texas in several we call them game of the year markets where you can bet Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M prior to the season. So I just don't see it this year. There's a couple things. It's not necessarily Ewers. I'm not a huge fan of him. It has
Hmm.
nothing to do with off the field. It's just on the field when they needed him to win the Oklahoma game last year, he wasn't on. I mean, Washington was a little hit or miss, especially early in that game.
Yeah.
And then specific to Texas, he loses his top four receivers. I know they brought in a bunch of guys from the portal, but they're not as good at receiver this year as they were a year ago. And the big reason why I don't like Texas is that what made them different last year from the previous 15 years of Texas football was those two stud defensive tackles that both are off in the NFL draft. So, and then plus a tougher schedule in the SEC. I mean,
Hmm.
the reality is Kentucky and Florida are better than Texas Tech and TCU. And Texas last year, Jason, I mean, I think people forget, oh, they made the playoffs. It's all great. I mean, they could have lost the Kansas State game, went to multiple overtimes, could have lost to TCU. I mean, it's not like they were dominant in a lot of their games.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Not great news. I got some Texas buddies who are fired up. Who their biggest game is, don't they host? Is it they host Alabama this year?
They host Georgia.
Georgia. I'm sorry. Yeah, they host Georgia. Do you ever go to games, by the way? I'm just curious.
Nah, it's tough. Maybe a weeknight game here and go watch UNLV, but I can't miss a
Yeah, because
Saturday.
you're firing
Yeah,
on
I'm live betting and stuff,
yeah.
and just and a lot of times my focus is already on the upcoming week because there's a book in Vegas circa that opens up the next week. I got to know stuff immediately on Sunday morning, like who got hurt in what game. So
Mm.
there's value in watching a bunch of games.
You mentioned who got hurt. I saw a report that injury reports are going to be a real thing in college football this season. Obviously, that's huge for gamblers. What do you make of this?
That's a good question. I'm kind of number one, I like the standardization of something. I get something, but coaches are going to be like Belichick. Everybody's questionable. Some guys probable. So you're going to have to it's going to take a while to get a feel for it. I kind of am against it, believe it or not, because I do the homework, I do the legwork. Sometimes you can find there's multiple times a year where you just by doing the legwork, you might have an inclination that starting quarterback ain't going to play. He's not on any injury report, nothing's reported, and boom bang, you guess right, and you're in front of a 4, 5, 6 point line move.
Yeah.
Where if the injury reports are out, I mean that's just going to become less frequent.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. Shador Sanders may be the biggest name in college football this season. I don't think we talked about him much last year, but they kind of surprised people early and
Yep.
then, normalized and were pretty crappy. Dion's been extremely mouthy in recent weeks. Shador was very noisy in the offseason, going after former players on social media. Like, I don't know what you're doing. Do you think Colorado's going to be any good this year?
Well, on one hand, Coach Prime's done a great job. I mean, you just look at Colorado's power ratings up more than 2 touchdowns from what he inherited. So, but it's always comparative relative to expectations. And obviously, a lot of people are thinking this is a Big 12 contending team. I don't see it. I also think it's a combustible type of situation where, boy, I mean, I don't think Shador should be at the top of the Heisman board, but I do think he's one of the most valuable players in college football. If he gets banged up, we're talking a team power rating going down a touchdown. I mean, you look at them at the end of last year. I mean, they're losing by 40 to Washington State because he's banged up. So you look at the schedule. I'll say this. No, there's no Oregon on the schedule where they're just completely outclassed, but there's not a single slam dunk win on the schedule for Colorado this year. Not even North Dakota State in the opener. I mean, it's not like that's a layup in that game. They're a single digit favorite. And I guess what the worst thing Coach Prime has done for Colorado is every team is like maxed out, the old spinal tap, the speakers go to 11. So Colorado's not that overly, they're not Alabama, they're not Ohio State. And yet everybody's maxed out intensity wise to play them each week because of their mouthy, in the media.
Mm,
So I just, I bet under 5.5. That's what you want a best bet season win total right now. Colorado under 5.5. I don't see a
wow.
bowl game.
Real quick, off the top of your head, do you know if any win total lines have moved more than other? Like, is there one team that swung by a full win, a win and a half? I don't any of that happening or not really.
Biggest one I've seen, UCLA, was 6.5 down to like 4.5 in spots. I mean,
Jeez.
obviously, not a fan of the Sean Foster, just inexperienced. I think the biggest thing is if there's one program that's really going to get hurt by moving from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, I mean, it's UCLA.
Mm.
And then you look, I mean, non-conference, you're playing LSU plus a Big Ten schedule. They're flying to Hawaii week 1. So, I mean, their travel schedule is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's probably a smart bet. I'm going to mention the kid at Nebraska, Dylan Raiola.
Yep.
Raiola, however you say it. He's basically got the Patrick Mahomes starter kit, where it's like the same shades, has the same
Yeah.
haircut, tries to do all this stuff. He does kind of look like Mahomes a little bit. The hype train is a little out of control, but I see plus 9,000 to win the Heisman. Is that worth pizza money, or would you rather just light it on fire?
No, I'd rather, well, I mean, buy pizza with it. I mean, at least you get some food consumption, some calories. But no, I wouldn't bet it. Although I'll say, I mean, they're going to get improved quarterback play, but the
Yeah.
market's all over this. I mean, Nebraska's win total 7.5. I mean, they're
Mm.
going to play. I mean, they haven't had a winning season in 7 years. Haven't been to a bowl game in 7 years. And to go over this total, 8-4 with a true freshman quarterback, I think that's asking a lot. They're going to be in a bowl game for the first time in forever, but I would tend to want to bet under 7.5 wins, which
Uh,
means no Raiola Heisman ticket in pocket.
Yeah, not happening. I don't know if you've seen the to make the playoffs wagers. There's some interesting, I don't know that they're long shots. I saw USC is plus 400. Now, I don't know what you make of this kid Moss at quarterback, but I mean, they're minus 600 no USC to make the playoff. Is maybe USC you don't like, but is there any team out there where you're like, listen, long shot, but the schedule lines up, love the quarterback, that kind of deal?
So I'm actually going to go to the group of 5. That's how I treated it as a separate market. One team out of the group of 5 is getting in it as an automatic bid. So I took and bet, and obviously you work your portfolio and you bet different amounts for each team depending on the odds. But I bet 5 out of the group of 5 to make the playoffs. So pretty decent odds. I mean, greater than USC at 4-1. So the teams I bet were Memphis, Boise State, App State, Texas State, and Liberty were the 5 teams. The longest shot was Texas State at 16-1 to make the playoff. I
Yeah,
like their schedule.
can you
So
imagine Texas State in the freaking college football playoff? They're what, like
they
three,
got a
four
young coach.
touchdown dogs?
I know you like names and stuff. GJ Kinney is the name to know. He's the head coach.
Where's he
Trust me,
from?
5 years to be like that. Brad Powers kid knew what he was talking about
Oh,
with
he's
GJ
gonna
Kinney
be
when he's coaching an SEC school.
wow. Okay, I'm not familiar with his work, but so five. So you think there's better value in one of those group five because for that's a good theory. I like that.
Yeah, I mean the way I treated it. I mean, any one of those 5 teams goes in, I make a profit. So I mean, I'm not a big, I'm a big bet a lot to win a little instead of bet a little to win a lot. Most pros are, but
Yeah, that's
uh,
smart move. Yeah.
I didn't. Here's the thing with that market that's really intriguing to me this year is how do you, because I expect Georgia to lose a game somewhere. I mean, they play at Ole Miss, at Texas, at Alabama. They'll lose one of them. Ohio State, I think, will lose at Oregon. If they keep these markets up on a weekly basis all year, I mean, I want to bet a team like Georgia to make the playoffs after a loss, and Ohio State after a loss to make the playoffs or even win the championship. And again, I expect some teams to rest some players. Again, I don't know if I expect maybe a few more upsets. So that's where I want to really get involved on that market.
I like that. To make the college football playoff, interesting. Missouri sitting at plus 175. I've done zero homework on Missouri. Please, is there anything there? Like, do we care about the Tigers again?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, that would be one that I would lean towards the yes, just because of schedule. They have by far the easiest schedule in the SEC this year. They're going to easily be favored in 10 of their 12 games. They lose their stud running back Schrader, but they did a good job in the portal. Quarterback's back. He's a pretty solid player, a little bit mobile. Defense loses quite a bit, and their defense corner. But again, go look at their schedule. I mean, it's a cakewalk for an SEC schedule, believe it or not. I mean, they're going to start off the gates a 3 touchdown plus favorite in their first 4 games.
Jeez, that's a good way to start the season. All right, let's go. We could wrap up with, Dabo Sweeney has been like too cool for the portal, and you've seen Clemson regress a little bit. Now, obviously, they're going to regress when they lose Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, but I don't. Where are you on what's happening with Dabo and Clemson? And you're really on the ground with this stuff. Is there chatter that like if he doesn't start to turn things around and wake up to like what the hell's happening in college football, they could put him on the hot seat?
No, they can't. A guy that's won
Okay,
multiple championships from at a school that hasn't won championships. No, I
fair.
mean, but let's just say, I mean, you said they haven't regressed much. I think they have.
Mm,
They basically his view on the transfer portal has taken him completely out of the national title
yeah.
picture. And look, if you don't believe me, look no further than that game one against Georgia. They're a 2-touchdown underdog. It's the largest underdog role for Clemson in any game in over a decade. So he doesn't have to fully embrace the portal. I'm not, if you're a Clemson fan, you're probably not asking Dabo to go out and get 15, 20 guys each year because he's worried about the culture. But what you should be doing is what everybody else is doing, even Georgia and Ohio State. If you have 4 or 5 holes at positions, go out and get 4 of the 5 best players in the country that you can to fill in some gaps from guys that left early or transferred out unexpectedly. I just can't believe he's like playing with one arm tied behind his back. So I still think they're among the best in the ACC. But there's a difference between being a conference contender and
Hmm.
the ability now to win 3, 4 playoff games. They don't have the depth.
I haven't read or spoken to anyone credible on this, but is there a legitimate reason why he's not doing this at all?
I I have not heard a legitimate other than
Mm.
he's worried about team culture and
Just bringing in
chemistry.
like a hired gun, that's risky.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know why he's worried about that. Well, go out there and do your background work on good kids. I mean, we mentioned Riley Leonard's a good kid. I mean, there's good kids out there you can bring in that are looking
Yeah.
to maybe step up to a Clemson that are at like other Power 4 schools.
He does seem like one of those guys where he doesn't want the kids to get like a ton of NIL money. He just strikes me as one of these like, hey, coaches get paid, players play, settle down.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he does seem that type. Because he was very anti players getting paid until they passed the legislation.
Yeah.
I'm all for paying the players. I mean,
Yeah. At what
I'm
point
all for
though?
player retention. Again, I would not be like a guy like Lane Kiffin wanting to get 15, 20 mercenary guys every year. But I would, if I was a coach, get 4 or 5 guys. What is Kirby doing? That's what he's doing. Even Ohio State, everyone's talking the portal. The reality is they went and got 4 or 5 of the best players they could in the portal. That's it. Not
Yeah.
like they're bringing in 15 guys.
And if you're a football player, wouldn't you rather go to Clemson than the Big Ten? Clemson's path to the playoff is
Yes,
easier than the Big Ten.
it is. Beautiful area of the country, too.
Their
I
facilities
don't
are
get it.
sick. Yeah.
They got money there. I mean, just player
Yeah.
retention, go out, get 4 or 5 guys, and you're right there.
All right. Brad Powers, college football guru, expert. Where else? You want to plug anything else? I don't know, man. You're on fire.
Well, I mean, I had to bring it. That's the name of the podcast. So no, just follow me on X, Twitter, whatever you kids are calling it. Brad Power
Yeah.
7.
By the way, are you betting on the election at all or no?
I have.
No way.
Yeah.
I
Oh
can't
yeah.
believe I
Well, you
asked
have
that.
to. I mean, honestly, they should legalize it. I mean, you can't bet. You got to bet it offshore and far away places. But that's the one market. If they want to bring in tax dollars and are legit. That's a multi-billion-dollar market
Hmm.
that's not legal here in the U.S. But I didn't think Biden was going to run, believe it or not to get political, but I was told around Super Bowl when the big wigs were in, keep in mind Super Bowl is here in Vegas. I was
Yeah.
told by some people on the inside that they didn't expect him to make it to November. So I took some long shots that aren't going to work out. I didn't know the rule was you
Wait,
had to
long
keep the
shots on
campaign
Trump?
funds. So I didn't bet Kamala. If I'd have known that rule, I would have bet her. But I bet Newsom and Michelle Obama long shots like
Oh,
30-1 because I didn't think Biden was gonna get there. But loser, I guess.
interesting. So wait, I am curious, and you don't have to give us a number, but can you get down big numbers offshore on this, or are they like
Oh yeah,
$500 limits?
5 figures, easy. At
Really?
one book, easy.
So why aren't
There's
they
so
doing it?
much volume to this that I mean, and then we're not even getting to. You can bet it even on election day. The wild swings.
Holy. So I wonder why they're not doing it here. I guess just the potential for malfeasance or
Yeah, I
some.
guess. But
But
again, that's an old school way of thinking. I mean, let the market I mean, there's going to be so much money that it's not going to matter. I know the bookmakers are afraid of book the number, take the bet in, adjust the lines, and do what. I mean, there's a lot of money to be had on the election because obviously people aren't thinking always clearly. They're very
Yeah.
passionate. There'll be wild swings. People will be doubling down, doubling down. So I wish
It's
it would
funny.
be
Yeah.
legal.
After that debate, everybody was like, "Oh, Trump is going to take the," and then all of a sudden the gambling odds swing to his favor. Biden's so old. Then they have the RNC. Biden steps out, Harris in, and now you look at it, and it's like, oh, Harris has all the swing states on her side. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm going to get involved in this market, but at this point, would you wager anything on either side or no?
Oh, wow. Good question. Well, I'll tell you, if you follow closely, I mean, there's wild swings. You can get plus money on both candidates. I would think Kamala gets a bump after the DNC
Yeah.
a little bit, but we've already started to see it swing back to Trump a little bit. Kamala
Hmm.
got out to like a minus 130, minus 140 favorite. Now it's coming down a little bit. I'd wait a week to see how this goes the next few days. I usually get a bump. I would expect the Trump money to come back in. Not that
Hmm.
this isn't a prediction of who's going to win. I just
Yeah.
know where the odds are going to go. But I would expect Trump money to come in after,
Yeah.
in a couple weeks.
It does feel like if you could spend all your time and energy honing in on like the 6 or 7 swing states, that maybe you could find an edge. But even the data on those 7 states is wild. Like one week it's like, oh, Pennsylvania's going Harris, and the next week, nope, oh, it's even. I don't know what to make of that.
This will blow you can bet Senate races, everything. I mean, hundreds of different props out there. So I literally, if you just wanted to bet election stuff and you want to do it full time and you feel like you could do it and had the bankroll, you could do it.
Yeah, that's a no thanks. I'll stick to football and trying to cash in the contest. Brad Powers, great stuff as always. Thanks a lot, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right.